91A. Alderman Clee will lead us, the prayer will be offered by Alderman Clee, and Alderman Sennett will lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty to manage the affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with the spirit of unity and understanding, which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all our fellow citizens. So help us God. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance, please.
Alderman O'Brien. Alderwoman Timmons. Alderman Moran. Alderman Thibodeau.
Here.
Alderman GOV.
Here.
Alderman Lopez. Alderman Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons. Alderman Sennett.
Here.
Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderman Thibault.
Here.
Alderman Clee is here. Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderman Kelly.
Here.
Alderman Wilshire.
Here.
Madam President, you have, I believe, 10 in attendance.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn the meeting over to the Chair of the Budget Review Committee, Alderman Dowd.
Okay, this evening we have a public hearing on two resolutions. The first is Resolution R-24-118, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $120,836.27 of FY 2025 unanticipated revenue into Fund Number 7024, Opioid Abatement Expendable Trust Fund. So we'll open the public hearing on that. Is there anyone here that's going to give us an overview? Right on time, Director Bagley.
Good evening, thank you. Director Bagley for City of Nashville Division of Public Health and Community Services. And here to speak on behalf of the Opioid Abatement Fund. So this is part of the settlement payment that we receive and different allotments when the money comes through. The funds do go into the trust fund that we use to help support individuals that are living in sober housing, to help support with rent, transportation, food, things that folks need that we know that will help them through their recovery process. And then we also use some of these funds to support some of our nonprofit organizations. This year, fiscal year, we were able to give out close to $224,000 to some of our partnering organizations that do work in treatment, prevention, and recovery. And we're also using some of the funds that we have this year to run the Elm Street warming station, which so far has been going pretty well. We have up to anywhere from 22 to one night we had 34 individuals using the site, which means there's a value added to that. We're keeping people inside and protecting them from the cold. And I hope that you will appropriate this funding into our trust fund as we continue to use it to support those in our community that are unhoused. Anywhere from 19 to over 70 years of age have been visiting us at the warming station. So there's a lot of work that we need to do aside from protecting people from the cold. We need to also continue to support the services that will allow for individuals to get into treatment recovery and in some stable housing. Thank you.
Any clarifying questions from members of the board, Alderman? Alderman Thibodeau? Thibault?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you said unanticipated, so we've already gotten this money, right?
This money comes in installments.
Okay.
And it'll be coming in for the next, it was 18 years for the next 16 years.
So the next 16 years, was it this exact amount?
No,
Oh,
it's
it's all
different
different.
amounts, different times, yeah.
Okay. And it's coming directly from the federal government? Is that where we're getting it
No, this funding actually comes from the settlement funds that came out of the suits for the pharmaceutical companies that were supplying opioids for pain use, but
That's
did
coming
not
from, like,
disclose.
Pfizer, or who's it
It's,
coming
it's a
from?
number of
Could be
pharmaceutical,
Each settlement?
McKesson,
Okay.
yeah, it's a number of different ones.
Okay. Thank you.
Walmart, anyone that sold opioids.
Okay, thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? Seeing none, thank you, Director Bagley.
Thank you.
All right, now I'll be accepting testimony in favor of R 24-118. Seeing none, testimony in opposition to R 24-118. None. Once again, testimony in favor of R 24-118. Seeing none. And once again, testimony in opposition of R 24-118. Seeing none. With that, I'll close the public hearing on Resolution R 24-118 at 7:06 PM. And at 7:06 PM, I'll open the public hearing on R 24-119 relative to the acceptance of $75,000 of anticipated grant funds and to accept and appropriate an additional $25,000 of unanticipated grant funds for Housing Opportunity Planning, HOP, grant from New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. Director Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Sullivan, Community Development Division Director, here on behalf of R 24-119. As some of you are familiar, in fact, all of you, I think, at one point or another, have come before this committee or one of the aldermanic committees to talk about some of the housing money that's been routed through New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority down to municipalities to work particularly on regulatory reform and other efforts to create opportunity around affordable housing and housing generally across the state of New Hampshire in light of our current housing crisis. Specifically here in the city of Nashua, we've received this in two different forms, one being actually incentive payments for creation of affordable units, and then we've received direct grants like this one, which actually is used to fund us updating things like our land use code that we're working on right now, as you're all aware. So our recode effort is funded partially through city funds and then partially through the state money. In conversations with Planning Manager Durfee over the last year, we identified a few additional needs that went above and beyond the monies that we have appropriated, either that state or local money. And really, they fell into three specific buckets. One being a rewrite of our subdivision regulations that deal with the creation of new parcel areas. Two, an update to our site plan review regulations in a way that would be compatible with the ongoing recode effort that's happening. And then three, sort of an interesting concept, and that was the idea of developing a set of standardized code-compliant accessory dwelling unit plans that could be used or potentially purchased and used by those in the community that are interested in creating additional housing capacity in the home that they own. And so this is a sort of a novel concept that's growing in popularity across the country. The idea that the municipality creates code-compliant stamped plans that are ready to go, but it introduces a permitting predictability and a nice pathway for someone that wants to do an ADU but may not have the $20,000 necessary to pay for building plans or that kind of thing. So this is an idea that we're really, really excited about. So lo and behold, we applied and we received $100,000. We had actually anticipated this grant in the fiscal 25 budget, and you've heard this from me before. We only anticipated $75,000 and we received $100,000. And so we're asking for certainly the acceptance of 100 in total, but 75 which was already anticipated in the budget, and 25 is supplemental to that. I'm happy to answer any questions about this program through New Hampshire Housing or any of the work that we're planning to do, but looking for your support this evening. Thank you.
Clarifying questions from the board? Alderman Clee?
Thank you. So,
Excuse me.
thank you. Bless you. So we had something similar to this before, if I'm not mistaken. This is just an additional to a grant that we've already accepted and so on. And we have to just kind of add on to it because of the way our budget and so on works. Am I correct? And I'm kind of asking this as well to the chairman.
Yes.
Is that correct?
The $75,000 has already been in the budget as anticipated, and this is adding $25,000 that wasn't anticipated.
Just to add, that's absolutely correct. One clarifying answer is that we received what I'm referring to as HOP 1.0 over a year ago. We received grant monies that are separate from this money. This is actually HOP, Housing Opportunity Planning 2.0. So we've received 2 substantial grants from the state of New Hampshire to support our recodification efforts. So this is a separate grant.
And may I-
Follow-up question?
Yeah, and may I just ask a question about what the grant is for? Is
Sure.
that okay? So this grant is for, so the individuals who want to do an ADU, rather than having to go out and themselves pay someone to create a plan for an ADU, the city will already have plans in place that they can just come and adopt and modify for their home, and it would save them the money of having to pay a professional to create these plans. They're already kind of like a modular type of, and in fact, it saves the residents that cost of having to do that. It may have to be modified slightly for their home, but it would kind of be a pre-written plan for them. Is that correct? Is that what this
Mr.
is?
Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Absolutely, Alderman Clee, that's it, with one really important piece that I know that you'll be sensitive to in your ward, and that is that it also gives the city the ability to define what it wants ADUs to look like. And so because we're creating these standardized plans, and we know everything needs to be context sensitive in the way that it's done, this will give the opportunity for you and our planning board to weigh in on 2 to 3 preferred design concepts that are acceptable. May have to be modified for each specific site, but that we generally agree are an acceptable form of ADU. And that's another piece of predictability that should come through this.
All
Thank you.
set?
Yes.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, Alderman Wiltshire.
How do you qualify for that?
That's a great question. We haven't yet figured that part out. We haven't figured out whether we intend to charge for these plans. I will tell you, it is used as a revenue source for other communities. We're trying to figure out whether or not us accepting this as a grant and then charging for the distribution of the plans will be an issue. I don't anticipate that there will be a qualification process. I want to reserve my right to change my mind on that, but I think anyone could come in and purchase those plans. It wouldn't be income qualified, but we'll definitely get back to you with a final answer on that, but we've had some conversations.
All set? Any other questions? No? Thank you, Director Sullivan.
Thank you.
I'll now open it up for comment and testimony in favor of R 24-119. Seeing none. Testimony in opposition, R 24-119. Seeing none. Once again, testimony in favor of R 24-119. Again, none. And once again, testimony in opposition of R 119. None. In that case, I'll close the public hearing on resolution R 24-119 at 7:13 PM. Do I have a motion from, Alderman Clements isn't here. Alderman Senate, you want to give a motion?
To make a motion that the Special Board of Aldermen be adjourned.
Motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 7:13. We'll go right into budget.
Just give us a few minutes.
Okay. I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's January 27th, 2025. We're in the Aldermatic Chamber at 7:15, and it's been duly noticed in 2 places, including the city's website, in accordance with requirements RSA 91-A:2-2. Let the meeting start by taking attendance. Clerk would take attendance.
Yep. Alderman Richard A. Dowd, Chairman.
Present.
Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien, Vice Chair. Alderman at Large Lori Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Derek Tebow is here. Alderman Tim Senate.
Here.
We also have in attendance Alderwoman or Alderman Klee, Patricia Klee, and Alderman Jettie. And we also have Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director, Kathy Fournier, Employee Benefits Manager, Nancy, I don't think all these people are here, though. Oh, sorry. Bobby Bagley, Public Health and Community Services Director, and Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director.
Okay. First item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to address us in public comment? Okay. None. Communications,
There is none.
there's a discussion. So I'm going to recognize Administrative Services Director Tim Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not sure if you want me to take a seat now, or if you want me to wait, but,
You can take a seat.
okay.
You've been on your feet all day.
So, thank you very much for making the time for me this evening. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. I am not sure which communication you have in front of you first this evening. I'm quickly looking, and it looks like it mentions my facilities.
Facilities was first.
So in your packet, you have a communication that I originally provided in May of 2024. I have since updated it for the body.
You need to.
I have two of those. Thank you.
And so, Mr. Chairman, what you have before you is an updated document that I just updated this afternoon. I have Jen DeShays with me as well. She has been a partner in mine as we've been working to develop this concept, and I just felt it prudent to provide you with an update this evening and ask that I come back before you and Personnel Administration Subcommittee in the near future to have a more robust conversation on this idea and concept of building out a more robust facilities team here in the city for general government. And so, as you can see, the plan here outlines a mission, a purpose, the core functions, and what this department will do. And of course, you may be asking, what do we currently do? And we have what we refer to as Buildings and Grounds department here in the city. The scope of that group is relatively limited, especially when you compare how asset management is done in other comparable municipalities. And so what I endeavor to do is continue to enhance the service delivery of buildings and grounds, change it into a more of a facilities management type of department. I've continued on in my memo, and you'll see where there's a line. That's basically anything after the line is the newer portions, which talks about staffing and how it would be staffed from administrative versus operational, service delivery, a needs assessment that would need to be done, continuing to do a budget analysis, and then how we would implement. And the key point to how we would implement is I think we need to be very cautious of our budget constraints. We would need to do this incrementally over a few years. It's something that if this organization and other groups in the city is committed to, I would suggest we would do it over a 3 to 4 year type of horizon, but we would eventually grow the services and implement this concept as I've outlined over a period of time. One of the things we've done since my initial conversation with you in May is we've spoken to both library and fire. We've had preliminary conversations with them, and I think both groups are interested in discussing this consolidated approach. I think they understand and see what we're trying to do, so cautiously optimistic on my end. that they will continue to want to learn about this and ultimately, hopefully, agree to work in this consolidated type of approach. So I'll leave my comments there, Mr. Chairman, but I did want to just provide you all with the work that Jennifer and her team have been doing over the last few months on this, and hopefully come back before you, before the budget season, to provide you with a more robust update and a conversation on this.
So just to keep it at the 55,000-foot level, you're gonna set up with city buildings much in the vein of like school department of the plant operations, Sean Smith, you're gonna have somebody that'll be responsible for all other city buildings besides schools. And my question is, are you going to start this in this year's budget in some small manner? And is that what you're gonna discuss with us the next time we get together?
Correct. That's right, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start this in the next budget and understand it's nothing we would be able to do in its entirety. But if there's agreement on this concept and we want to build and work towards it over the next few years, we would incrementally grow the department.
Questions? Alderman Tebow?
Thank you. First, just a point of order. So he added on to this, and he didn't change or update something. He added on. So do we have to accept this as a new document? Okay, because the one we got in our packet is old, and obviously, before the meeting, we'd obviously like to have it so we could review it, and obviously, we haven't been able to review this part. So, so can I make a motion to accept the new copy that's had the added on after the line?
Okay, the motion on the floor is to accept the communication was received after the agenda was prepared. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. Director Cummings, is it fair to say that the next time we see this and hear from you about this will be budget season for fiscal year 2026?
Cummings?
No, ideally before then, I'll come before you, one more time, maybe more than that if need be. Also, hopefully going to personnel and administration and having a similar type conversation where it's going to be before we go into the budget season, because if there isn't an appetite to do something like this, I don't want to put it in the operating budget.
Okay.
Yeah, there are probably going to be 2 or 3 special budget meetings on things about the budget, so that we have an understanding before the mayor does his budget, or how the board feels about certain elements like this.
And I should also point out, Mr. Chairman, if I may, some of what I'm talking about doesn't necessarily have a budgetary impact as well. Some of it is just more administratively from an executive standpoint, how we look at our buildings and grounds group and making sure we're clear on their mission, making sure we're clear on the service delivery, making sure we're clear on the goals and expectations. And yes, with some of that, is there sometimes a budget impact? Absolutely. But what I think we need to be committed to is being cognizant of the constraints we have with our operational budget. And if we can't afford to do it, we won't do it. But that shouldn't deviate from the mission of us trying to move in a direction where we manage our assets in a higher and better way so we get more out of them. Case in point, real life example I'm dealing with over the last couple of weeks, it was brought to my attention that water spilled on a floor, in a brand new floor that we had just put down, and has now caused the floor to buckle. And we're gonna have to replace that. Now, it's still under warranty, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. But if we had a certain level of stewardship, that I do not fault anyone who doesn't have any type of expertise in this because they don't know any better. That's why we need to have the appropriate personnel working alongside us to make sure that we are handling things appropriately so we don't have to do something, particularly when we're out of warranty. So I say that to the group to kind of just give you an understanding of what's driving this conversation. Ultimately, this will be, I believe, a budget saver for the city. In the long run, there will be efficiencies that get realized. Nothing that I'm talking about today contemplates where other municipalities have gone, which is internal plumbers, internal electricians, internal carpenters, because we would save money having that in-house versus, the various external services that we procure. That is really far down the road. I just want us to kind of build a base and foundation. Once we build that base and foundation, you know, we can go with it where this body would like.
So with all of that, your first step is to come up with a plan.
That's right, and what I'm hoping you all do is review this document, because this is gonna be the guideposts for that plan that I'm developing.
Hey, Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think the concept of it is right. Like, I think it's a good idea, going in the right place. I think, obviously, you know, ferreting out, I guess, what we're gonna do first, and what could we do first, and how it impacts the budget, right? So that will be something I wanna see, like, you know, you said it wouldn't be obviously all at once. So is it 10%? Is it 25%? Is it 50%? Which part are we doing first? Will it cost money? Will it not cost money? Right? Because you're right, some of it's just efficiency gains, moving some pieces on the chessboard, but then obviously there's gonna be, looks like new positions and some moving around and some stuff. So that's the part I'll be curious about, how much money it will cost up front. But I think the concept itself is something I would want to go to. It's just, how much is it gonna cost? When is it gonna cost that much? And because I know we're gonna have it's gonna be, the first year here, it's gonna be tough. This first year is gonna be a little rough on budget, so, but I like the concept.
Any other questions? Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So on the original plan that you submitted, you highlight in the last, second to the last paragraph, you've highlighted, this department also maintains the budget for the city-owned streetlights and hydrants. And it's not highlighted in the new version, and I'm wondering, what's the significance of highlighting that? Was there a reason that you wanted to bring that to our attention?
Yes, thank you. If I could, Mr. Chairman, excellent question. That was really just highlighted at the time to call out the fact, and this goes to the point that some of this is a quote-unquote chess game. It's gonna not necessarily have budgetary impacts, but we're just gonna be reorganizing some stuff, because right now we carry those two line items in a different department's budget. And what we would do is move those lines into this department's budget. And that was the reason why I highlighted it back then as an example during the FY24 budget, or I'm sorry, the FY25 budget season. I really just wanted to kind of tease that point out so you were aware of, if and when we were to do something like this, you would see movement within the operational budget such as that. I've had conversations with CFO Griffin, who currently manages those lines, and because we do it within other government, other general government is the department. And so I wanted to make sure he was understanding and comfortable and aware this is something that I was suggesting. We've had those conversations, hence the reason why it's not highlighted anymore.
Well said, Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. Yes.
So basically what they're saying is that each one of our group, police, fire, DPW, they all have like deferred maintenance accounts, and personnel that do their maintenance, it'll all be referred into this group and expanded perhaps. Alderman Clee?
Thank you very much. I'm glad to see us looking at all of these things, and I'd like to see us looking at everything as a whole. And I'm also glad to hear you say that we're looking at it with an eye on that maybe it'll work and maybe it won't work. And I always like to approach everything very cautiously. When I worked for the federal government, we made a bold move of, they decided they were going to play a game. We called it the Go-Go-Coco, government-owned, company-operated, company-owned, company-operated, and everybody was like, we can contract everything out, and it's going to be so much cheaper for the government. And when we actually, that was my job, to do a cost analysis of whether or not it really was going to be cost effective, it turned out it really wasn't. It was always cheaper to do everything in-house with our own resources and so on. So the fact that we're looking at as to, you know, whether we do it all under one umbrella or whether we do it piecemeal, I always think it's cheaper to do it under one umbrella because you can do it. But as you say, having the body there versus having to call it because of, as you said, the spillage and so on. So I really do appreciate that you're looking at everything in that way, but I like moving slow. So as long as we're going to go slow and we're really going to look at everything, I do appreciate it. we have the budget coming up really quick, so I also have a little anxiety about that we're going to be moving a little too fast. So slow and with a real eye of listening, and because once we move, I'm afraid that we can't undo something. So thanks.
Alderman Wiltshire?
I just have to say, I like the idea, so I'm looking forward to what you have coming forward in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we'll look forward to the next time we have the discussion. So I think we probably ought to hold on the healthcare benefits till the last one. And why don't you give us a real brief overview of the compensation study? And I'm sure we'll have another meeting on that too as well.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your packets, and this is more of an FYI for you, the city a few months back procured MGT, otherwise known as GovHR, to help us with a classification and compensation study of unaffiliated employees. We have our report back. I wanted to provide it to you all. I've gone before personnel administrations on a couple of occasions as the study was underway to provide updates, gain feedback. I'll be looking to do that again with that body, hopefully next month. But I wanted to provide you all with this report. I don't know if we will make this year's operational budget because we need to have legislation. We need to have agreement on this. So, you know, it may be in a future operational budget if we ever do adopt this study. But nonetheless, wanted to provide it to you all this evening, make sure you had it and you could review it, and happy to answer any questions at a later date once you've had a chance to digest it, but really just wanted to put this on your radar. Ultimately, you know, there's a lot of talk within the report of the methodology and what we did, and there is a recommendation. Most people just want to know how much is it going to cost, what is it that it's recommending, and so the long and short of it is, if I was to just cut right to the chase, when I was at Personnel Administration, I had suggested that we could go forward with either 50th, 60th, 70th, or 80th type of percentile. Ultimately, the MGT is recommending the 70th percentile. I'm not sure that that's going to be the legislation that gets filed. Part of what I'm hoping to hear is some feedback from you all before we do file any legislation. I think what you're going to hear my recommendation be is something in between the 50th and the 80th percentile, which is, if we do the math, maybe something like the 65th percentile, but that's a little less than what the consultant is recommending, but it's also it's also got to be looked at as to what we could afford. So more to come, but wanted to just put this on your radar, and I'll be looking to have a conversation with Personnel Administration as well on this, and if you'd like to have me back after you've had a chance to digest this, welcome that type of conversation before any type of legislation gets filed. I would like to try to file some legislation in February or at the latest March type time frame, which is why I'm cautioning that we might not make this year's operational budget.
So, we'll get the details later, but any high-level overview questions that you might have for Director Cummings? Is this all non-affiliated positions? correct? It's
Unaffiliated.
not- Yeah, because we have no control over the others, so, contracts. All right.
And then
Questions on that? Did you want to do,
My last communication is just asking for a special budget review committee meeting sometime in the near future, ideally before, sometime in the beginning of February, where I'd like to have an operational budget conversation with everyone, so we can, at a very high level, talk about some of the challenges, some of the impacts, some of what we're seeing. Have that conversation very early before we actually go into the budget season, and definitely before anything gets submitted to you all. So I submitted a communication asking for a meeting sometime in the next couple weeks.
are we setting up special budget review committee to get a handle on inputs that we can give to the people as they develop their budgets before the budget process goes? Not rather than waiting till we get the budget and it's too late unless we take things out of it. So, and there'll be a couple things. They've also asked for a review of the expendable trust funds, go through that, so we have a meeting on that as well. All right, there's nothing, a question on that. Insurance?
Yes, thank you. So with us this evening, if I could ask Kathy Fournier and Tom DeLacy to join me up here. We have a preview and a presentation of our healthcare benefits that I would like you all to be provided and to provide you with an overview of where we're at. So I know there's a PowerPoint up on the screen. I'm not sure whether we should click through or how we navigate that.
I can click.
You'll do it? Okay, great. So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I have Tom DeLacy to my left, Benefits Manager Kathy Fournier to my right.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Tom DeLacy, Benefits Consultant with Workplace Benefit Solutions, a Hub International company. So you'll, as we more rebrand to Hub, you'll see that. So, Mr. Chairman, Alderman, thank you for having me tonight. I'll try to move quickly through this because I know you have a lot on your schedule, but please feel free to stop me if you want to dig into a particular area. So we're just going to run through real quick who we are. I've kind of covered some of that. Talk about self-funded medical plans and what that really means so that you have a sense of why are we self-funded, what's the value of that versus being fully insured, and what's frankly the difference between those. A little history of the national benefits, challenges that we're facing, some opportunities, and then sort of some next steps, things that we talked to you about last year that we're pulling together for this year. So Workplace Benefit Solutions started by my partner and I about 20 years ago in Manchester, New Hampshire. We've really had two focuses, one in municipalities, one in hospitals. So we have a lot of hospitals as clients in New Hampshire and a lot of municipalities. About 12 years ago, we were purchased, or I used to say merged, but Hub is a I don't know, $24 billion company now, so we were purchased. And we really thought, this was around the time of healthcare reform, we really understood that bigger was going to be better, more resources were going to be important. When we joined Hub, it was about 6,500 employees, now we're about 20,000. And a lot of that has been acquisitions of companies like ours. And a lot of those acquisitions have been in the employee benefit space and brought more resources to us. So that's been really kind of neat. As we kind of run our operation as we always have, now we have all these resources of a top 5 national broker, multi-billion-dollar company. So just a quick splash of some of our employers. So some of these names you'll recognize: Manchester School District, I think City of Rochester, Dartmouth Hitchcock, Cantor Fitzgerald, and Newmark Realty, and so on. So we only work with large employers. So our smallest client is about 250 employees. Our largest is probably up there, University of Maryland Medical System, 16,000 employees. Our median is about 1,000. So kind of a little bit smaller than you, but kind of the average is right there around, or median's right there around 1,000 employees. So just talking about the benefits that we manage for you. So we have our self-funded medical plan. We offer a number of different plans. We offer an HMO, a point of service, and a health savings account, or HSA. So that's a high deductible plan married to a health savings account. Those two together we always just kind of refer to as an HSA. That's about half of our population, and then the remainder is in the HMO with very few people in that point of service plan. We have still to, I think our collective chagrin, we have 8 dental plans. Many of them are very similar. This really comes out of historic negotiations of maybe something was tweaked in one plan, and so you end up having these multiple plans. From a financial perspective, it really isn't a burden. It doesn't change things dramatically. It really is more of a burden on the administrative side. You're administering 8 different plans, and some of them are very, very similar. So we really are trying to work hard to, work with the unions and see if we can cull that down to, quite frankly, 2 or 3, maybe 4. We also offer, the city offers life insurance to all employees, and then certain employees have short-term disability, other long-term disability, and then there is an EAP program. We offer a post-65 retiree medical plan. We've got a couple slides in there. There's been some, you may have even heard of this in the marketplace. Medicare Advantage plans have seen a dramatic shift in reimbursement by the federal government, so we'll talk a little bit about that. We also help manage retiree billing so that your early retirees, that's not happening administratively here at the city. We've outsourced that so that we have better records and can make sure that that's being done appropriately and again, isn't a huge burden and a lot of paper pushing. And then also flexible spending accounts and COBRA. So if we jump ahead to next slide. So just talking about self-funded, a self-funded medical plan. So if you think about your auto insurance or your homeowner's insurance, that's what we would call fully insured. The insurance company charges you a premium, you pay that premium. If you have a claim, they pay the claim, kind of winner take all, right? If you think about your auto insurance, it's probably the insurance company's winning year after year after year, and then all of a sudden you get in an accident, and that might, they might pay out 10 years worth of premiums that you've paid. So that's what a fully insured is, kind of winner take all. Self-funded is a little bit different. What we're doing in a self-funded plan is we're hiring an administrator. In this case, it's Anthem. And we're paying them a fairly nominal amount, roughly $50 per employee per month to pay the claims, provide a network, provide medical management, be the claim fiduciary. And the claim fiduciaries, that's the organization that's making the decision, is this a covered benefit or not? You don't want to make those decisions. You don't want that liability. We want to put that liability off to the insurance company who has the resources and the expertise to make those decisions. We don't often have issues with claim coverage, but occasionally something happens. Is that medically necessary? Is that experimental? So they're the ones making that call. Pharmacy is a subset of that, and we can choose to carve out our pharmacy program, or we can have that within the Anthem umbrella. What we typically do is we're going to go out to the market. We can go to third-party pharmacy benefit managers, or what we call PBMs, and we can solicit quotes from them and negotiate pricing on discounts off of brand name drugs, discounts off of generic drugs, pharmacy rebates, and pharmacy rebates have become a huge part of the overall package. We're getting somewhere around $2.5 to $3 million back in pharmacy rebates. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Oh,
Can I ask
yes.
a question? I don't know if this would be considered off track, but recently when Anthem had this war, so to speak, with St. Joseph's Hospital, where Anthem really isn't paying because we're self-funded, there was a lot of hubbub going on with our teachers and so on, being very upset on social media, saying that they were afraid that the claims weren't going to be paid because Anthem and St. Joe's was having this war, so to speak, where Anthem really isn't paying because we're self-funded. Was that ever in jeopardy?
yeah, so if you kind of look up to that provider network, so Anthem is providing that network of hospitals and doctors and all service providers, and part of that is getting a discount, and a pretty significant discount. So could we theoretically, if St. Joseph was not in the network, could we theoretically gone directly to them? Theoretically, we could have at about roughly double the cost. So if Anthem is getting a 50% discount, then our cost would have gone up by that amount. So we were kind of internally huddling on what if this doesn't get fixed. Quite frankly, I started my career 30 years ago with Cigna Healthcare and HealthSource. Been through this literally dozens of times. And at the end of the day, cooler heads prevail. People figure out that A, we're here to service the community, and B, we need each other. But we were looking at different avenues to say, what if this doesn't get resolved? What would be the options? Quite frankly, none of them were great, but we wanted to be prepared to answer those questions and say, hey, we can do this. Here's why either we should or we shouldn't do that.
Okay.
But no one's happier than, I think, the three of us sitting here that this was resolved last Friday at 6 p.m., I think.
Me too. Trust me, all
Yeah.
my doctors were with St. Joe's, and
Yeah.
I'm a federal Anthem
right.
subscriber too, so I
There you
was
go.
sweating it out too.
There you go. Yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you.
All set, Alderman Clee?
Thank you, yes.
Yes. So in a self-funded plan, what we're trying to do is we're trying to remove certain things. So we're taking on the risk, okay? So, when I say we, the city of Nashua, is taking on the risk. In return for that, we're saving a 2% premium tax. So 2% of all premium goes to the state of New Hampshire. We're saving 3 to 5% of claim margin, and that's basically the insurance company saying, hey, we think your claims are going to be about $40 million next year based on last year and history and big data and all the different algorithms they have, but they can't be sure. So they're going to put some buffer in there because they don't want to lose their shirt in this deal. So there's going to be a buffer in there. If that buffer gets used, so be it. If it doesn't, the insurance company just keeps that as additional profit. Well, we know over time those things are going to average out, and we don't want to pay that extra margin. And then you have pharmacy savings, both in terms of the discount you get off that drug that you purchase, and also these pharmacy rebates. And I always say to think about pharmacy rebates as almost like shelf space in a grocery store, right? If you've got that eye level, you know, you're paying a little bit more to get your product there. If you've got the end cap, well, that's the Mac Daddy, right? Like that's where you want to be. So this is a similar type of thing where a manufacturer will say, okay, if we're in the top tier or whatever, we'll give X amount of rebate. And that rebate could be 30 or 40% of the drug. And many drugs now are coming out at $1,000, $1,500 a month. So this is real money, and we've seen that grow from, oh boy, 7, 8 years ago it was 400,000 or 500,000 for the city. Now it's close to 3 million. So, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I spent 17 years at United Healthcare, so I know health insurance pretty well. So can you just explain self-funded and fully funded? Explain the difference in the fact that what is a cheaper way to go? Like, obviously, if you can do self-funded and you have some people that are very, 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 very sick, right, and have tons of claims, is that still better than fully funded? I'm trying to explain the difference between the two and why one's better than the other.
Yeah, sure.
Outside of these things here.
Yeah, and really what you're getting towards is sort of at the bottom, and that's buying stop loss. So let me go there, and then I'll wrap that all around.
Thank you.
So stop loss puts guardrails. So when we're saying we're taking the risk, or the city's taking the risk, all the claims that have to be paid are paid with your money that Anthem pulls out of a bank account and then uses it to pay the providers. Now, whether you're fully insured or self-funded, if you go to Southern New Hampshire Medical Center and you have an MRI and it's code blah, 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 XYZ, it is the same cost. Doesn't matter if you're a group of 1 or a group of 1,000 or 10,000. They've got a contract with Southern New Hampshire or with St. Joseph to pay X amount for that service. Where it does differ a little bit is in the pharmacy. If we go direct to a pharmacy benefit manager, we can get a better discount off of a retail drug. We can get a better discount off of a brand name drug, retail brand name drug, or mail order brand name drug, or generic drugs. We can also get those pharmacy rebates. So in a fully insured case, if we said to Anthem, hey, give us a fully insured quote for our group, they're generally going to be anywhere from 10 to 15% higher. You don't get the rebates. They're going to want an 85, 86, 87% loss ratio, which means 87 cents goes to pay claims, 13% goes to Anthem. Of that, 2% goes to the state, but they're keeping those rebates as well, which is about 7 or 8% of your total spend. So if you're large enough, and when I say large enough, 300-400 employees, self-funded is the way to go. In groups of that size, I think the most recent thing I saw was 89% were self-funded. Some groups may not self-fund because A, they don't want to take the risk, or B, some government contractors, everything is cost plus, and it's really hard to prove out what the cost of healthcare is when you're self-funded. Sometimes the government says, no, we're not going to accept that. We need to see a fully insured premium. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, great. So that stop loss it's a guardrail that says, hey, if we have 10 premature births and each, they're all twins and each one of them is $1 million, which is totally, $1 million for a premium is probably low these days. Well, that's $20 million. We can't absorb that. So we buy stop loss, and stop loss says any claim in excess of $350,000, the stop loss insurance company pays that. So we remove that risk. So that really kind of, in a group this size, it really kind of tightens up what our risk is. We also can buy aggregate stop loss that says if we think claims are going to be $10 million, anything 25% above that is paid by the stop loss carrier. So if you had this awful year and you had all these claims and you had all these $300,000 claims, so they didn't hit stop loss, but instead of 10 million, you got to 12 and a half, the insurance company would pick up above that.
Yeah, when you talk about prescriptions and the stop loss, is there a laser, like, do you laser anyone out of that?
So that's a great question. So a number of years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, we went to all of the stop loss carriers that we work with, and we said, we want these provisions in the contract. There would be no new lasers, and we would have a rate cap. And we're going to talk about some prescription drugs that are $2 or $3 million. That's why we want that cap. So the contract that we have with all of our clients is the stop loss carrier can't add a laser at renewal, and there's got to be a rate cap, because one without the other doesn't really matter. Now the rate caps aren't awesome. They're 40% or 45%, but your stop loss is 3 or 4% of your dollar. So it's a small piece.
Thank you.
Yep. So speaking of the percentage, so right now your stop loss is 4%. So going back to your question, Alderman, if you look at the administrative fees, 2.4% is what we're paying in administrative fees. So that's what Anthem is getting to administer our plan for us. So to pay the claims, to answer the phones, to fight with the providers and get the best deal they can, and so on and so forth. They're getting about 2.4% of the dollar. Stop loss is 4.2, and stop loss can really vary. So in this meeting last year, the stop loss carrier paid out more than we paid them in premium. In the 2024 fiscal year, they only paid out about $200,000. And that's really the vagaries of stop loss. It can be all over the place. It's wildly unpredictable, and that's why we have that coverage and want to maintain those parameters around it. Your medical claims are roughly 70%, pharmacy 17%, which is really good. And then we have the employer contribution to the HSA. So with the HSA, we increase the deductible. That lowers the premium cost for the plan, and we take that savings and we use that to fund the HSA. So those HSA dollars are really kind of trading claim dollars for HSA funding. And we feel that when people have that HSA funding, they operate differently, right? It's their money. So they're more likely to get a generic drug or go to the low-cost provider, because whatever's left in that HSA at the end of the year is theirs, and it rolls over to the next year and the next year. So it really activates the consumer that's kind of really in all of us. We just need a reason to be a good consumer, and we need information to help us be a good consumer.
Alderman Sullivan?
So that last line there, the employer contribution to HSA, all the HSAs that I've done, and I just need a point of clarification on, I've had to pay into, and it truly was my money. So did you say that the city contributes? What's the average contribution per employee?
So in the case of the city of Nashua, it's quite high. It's 75% of the deductible liability. Typically, we would see about 50%. If we go back to 2012-ish, when we started the HSA, we had people on an HMO that had a $10 office visit, $100 if they were hospitalized, nothing if they had an outpatient surgery, God bless you, and I think a 5, 15, 35 drug card. So as close to 100% coverage as you could get. The actuarial value of the plan was like 98% of the dollars were paid by the plan, 2% by the member. So when we created the HSA, My preference would have been a 50% contribution. So if you had a $2,000 deductible, we'll contribute 50%, 1,000 in the HSA. But that just wouldn't, nobody would have chosen that. So that's why we went with the 75%. Even that was less costly than the HMO. And we've seen that over the years, the HSA has trended or increased at a slower rate than the HMOs have. But it is a very rich plan.
All set?
Yep, thanks. So this is really kind of taken a bite out of us over the last few years. If we go prior to COVID, trends were in the 6.5% range. 2020, COVID year, everybody's costs were down. 2021, they started to rebound. And really what's escalated has been large claims since then. So particularly cancer, and quite frankly, I can say across every one of my accounts, cancer has skyrocketed. Anthem's actually working on a white paper on this, but I've talked to many other carriers. Everybody would say the same thing, that the number of cancer cases that were stage 1 or 2 used to be about, prior to COVID, about 70%. That's literally flipped. 70% are 3 or 4, which is frightening. That's been one of the things that's driven trend up to that 9.5% range. So that's basically saying if we or the carrier, if we predict your claims exactly, you would expect a 9% increase. So trend or inflation is the rate that things are increasing in healthcare. We're starting to see it moderate a little bit, but I think the trends are going to lag a little bit.
Alderman Clegg?
Do they feel that this trend is because of COVID, the lack of probably care that was given during COVID because they couldn't get treatment, they couldn't get diagnostic through the COVID period?
Yeah, that's what everyone
closed down.
really believes relative to the high claim. It's the cancers, the heart disease, diabetes, that people didn't get care because they couldn't.
Right.
And it hasn't been as bad in New Hampshire, but for anybody who lives in Massachusetts trying to get health care, trying to get a PCP, a physical, it's extremely hard. Mm-hmm. Because with COVID, what happened is a lot of providers that were in their 50s and 60s that would have worked another 5 or 10 years, retired.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were done.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So this really kind of goes along with that. We always look at medical trend or medical inflation and, want to say, well, it's the insurance company, it's the pharmaceutical companies, it's the government, it's this, it's that. The reality is it's a lot of different things. It's drug prices and devices. It's new drugs that are coming onto the market that literally are curing things like blindness in children. I mean, it's amazing what's coming out, but the cost is, I want to say obscene, but it's dramatic. But there are all kinds of different reasons that go into why medical trend is what it is. And we saw it playing out in the last few weeks, right? St. Joseph, the hospital, wants or needs an increase that's here. And Anthem says, well, if we give you that increase, then our clients pay, let's say it's 10%, our clients pay 10% more next year. So it's, and not saying who's right or wrong, but it's this balancing act. And all of these things come together to drive that cost. Thank you. And this is really what it looks like. Fiscal 24 to fiscal 28, at this, we used 8% trend on this. 47 million to 62 million. And 80% of that is the city's cost. So pretty dramatic, and why we don't want to take benefits away from people, but there's really some great opportunities to get people to use more efficient providers. And the more efficient we are, we just squeeze costs out. You're not taking anything away. We're just getting people to go to the most efficient place, whether it be a Quest lab versus a hospital or so on. This is just a look at, since fiscal 11 through fiscal 24, kind of where you are. The red line was trend in each one of those years, so it was PricewaterhouseCoopers trend. And then the blue is how your plan ran. You can see that dip that's 2020, COVID, so a lot of things. And then you can see kind of an increase off of that at a higher pace than we had seen previously. I won't go through this. This is a dashboard that we go through with finance and Tim and Kathy. The speedometer is what grabs your eye. So this is fiscal '24. We're about 6% over budget. If we flip one ahead, fiscal '25 through December, we're at 97% of budget. So we're 3% below budget, roughly $800,000. Little disappointed to see December kind of jump up. And if you see in the middle, on the left-hand side, you see the green bars, and then you see that blue. The blue is your budget. And the reason it has that spike in it, that's your HSA contributions. You make half of them in July, and then another chunk in October. That's why you have that bump there. December was over that blue line, as was October. So running a little bit hot in those months. So cost drivers, this might be a little bit hard for you to see, but really just look at the highlights. Fiscal 2020, these are your large claims. So you can see that the first large claim was, $1.2 million. But if you look at all the highlighted yellow, that's 12 cancer claims. And I think about $4 million. If we go to the next slide, we've got 2023. Again, 12 cancer claims. I mean, it's just absolutely dominating your large claim pool. And then we go to 24, we drop down to about 7. But still, the biggest driver of your large claim costs. The next slide just kind of summarizes that. So 2022, you had $4.3 million in cancer claims. That was your largest cohort. The second one actually is in green, health status encounters. That's actually good. That's people going for offices, it's physicals, their preventive screenings, their preventive labs. We like to see that number high, and we like to see that high on the list. 2023 was really very much the same, although your costs were a little bit lower. And then 2024, health status came up above cancer. But cancer was still $3.3 million on 7 cases. The year before, it was $3.8 million on 12 cases. So we've seen the number of them come down, but the severity go up. Prescription drugs, huge driver, and this is really so you can see 22, 23, some of the different drugs. So Stelara is your highest drug. That is for Crohn's disease. You see Revlimid in both years. That's a cancer drug. Promolist is cancer as well. And then you see in 2023, you probably see these commercials every time you turn the TV on.
We're all dancing around.
Ozempic. So Ozempic for type 2 diabetes has emerged as a top 3 in 2023. Jump to next slide, 2024. Ozempic is now number 2. 376 scripts. I think that's about double what 2022 was. You see Stelara remains there. Crohn's disease, Revlimid continues to be up there. Humira Pen, we'll talk about that a little bit. If you flip to the next slide. Oh, actually, we'll talk about that in a few more slides. I'm going to jump and pivot a little bit to talk about the Medicare Advantage plan. So the Medicare Advantage plan is the plan that you offer to post-65 retirees who are on Medicare. So this is essentially taking your Medicare card, put it in your drawer, and now you have this full, almost like your active plan, like an HMO with Anthem, and it covers everything that Medicare covers, and then it gives you some other goodies like wellness things and so on. When we first moved to the Medicare Advantage plan, it was about 45% less than a Medigap plan or the Medicomp 3 plan that we had years and years and years ago. So retirees have saved a lot of money with the Medicare Advantage plan. Medicare Advantage is really subject to how CMS, which is the Centers for Medicare Services, reimburses the plan. So the employees pay about $400 a month. Medicare pays about $700 or $800 a month for each one of those retirees. So they say in a geographic area, based on gender and age, this is what we're gonna pay you, Anthem, to cover these Medicare retirees. The carrier there, Anthem, can charge whatever they need to get to their full premium to cover costs and so on, and it's generally cheaper. Long and short is, if Medicare continues to increase that reimbursement, so 800 goes to 850, goes to 9, goes to 950, that type of thing, 4 or 5% a year, everything's great. If we kind of fast forward and maybe jump to the next slide, the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act. So you may have heard the Inflation Reduction Act, it actually pulled about $450 billion over 10 years away from Medicare. And what they ended up doing is it's in two areas. One, Medicare used to, on the medical portion, go up about 4 or 5% every year. This year, in calendar 2025, it's going to go down about 0.1%. So instead of going up 5%, and that 5% was probably worth $50 or $60, it's going to go down 0.1%. The other piece that changed is you may have heard about the Medicare prescription drug or Part D donut hole. That was where you would have coverage for the first $2,000 of your drugs. Then there was a donut hole. Then there was this catastrophic level of coverage at $8,000. And anything at that $8,000 level was covered at 100%. Federal government paid 60 of it, or excuse me, paid 80 of it. The plan paid like 10 of it, and the drug manufacturer paid 10 of it. What happened was, in the Inflation Reduction Act, they brought that catastrophic from 8,000 to 2,000. So they got rid of the donut hole. Great. A million people will pay, a million retirees will pay $1,000 less next year. Excellent. Problem is, Medicare said, okay, the catastrophic level is now 2,000, and instead of paying 80%, we're going to pay 20%. Health plan, you pay 60%, and manufacturer, you pay 20%. Massive cost shift, right? So if the plan, if they say to the carrier, you pay 60%, well, what does that mean? They pass that on to the end user. So we saw increases of 30, 40% for Medicare Advantage plans in the January 1 cycle. We saw Humana, Aetna, and United all pull back, and they're not quoting them right now. They're trying to figure out, what does this all mean? And for Aetna in particular, or CVS Healthcare, that one, it has tanked their entire company, like a 50% reduction in their stock price, people, people losing their jobs and just trying to reshape. So really catastrophic. We don't know what our increase is yet, but just want to give you a heads up that it's not going to be the $3, $5, $10 that it was in the past. It's probably going to be north of $50 per person per month. It's a really big deal to retirees. We did a lot of research over January. Even with those increases, best deal on the street by far, by like $100, $120 a month. But we'll do the same research again. Next. So, challenges. We've talked about some of these. Carrier consolidation, we've seen that over the last number of years, and we're going to see more. Humana's looking for somebody to buy them. Provider consolidation, we've seen St. Joseph be purchased by Covenant. CMC was just purchased by HCA. HCA just happened a couple weeks ago. Really, this is all, it's about survival, and it's about gaining leverage, right? It's the carrier wants to get bigger to impose their will to drive down costs. The hospitals want to get bigger and to survive and to be able to fight and get the best reimbursement that they can. Again, not taking side, there's no winners here. This is really hard, and it's about, can we find ways to be more efficient? The COVID-19 hangover, we talked about that a little bit and what's happened with large claims, and then kind of increased pharmacy spend. So spending on specialty drugs, if you look, 211 billion 2016, 301 billion 2021, and it's just going to continue to go up. And it's expected about 20-25% a year increase in specialty drugs versus other drugs. And those specialty drugs are all coming on the market at $3, $5, $10, $30, $50,000 a month. They do amazing things, but very, very expensive. There is some good news. I mentioned Humira before. Humira was, I think, one of the first billion-dollar drugs. There is now a biosimilar for Humira. And Anthem right now is still taking the approach that if you're on Humira, you can stay on Humira. If you're new to using that drug, and Humira is for rheumatoid arthritis, if you're new and newly prescribed that, they're probably going to recommend a biosimilar for you. Biosimilars are kind of like generics, but they're not exactly the same. But we're seeing some major reduction in costs, I think close to $20 billion over the next 3 or 4 years just on Humira. And then gene therapies, and this is, honestly, guys, this is the wow factor, right? So you have Luxturna, $850,000 one-time cost. The thing that's really good about these drugs, these are one-time costs. It's get the infusion, get the treatment, you're done. So when you're talking about Hemgenix for hemophilia B, a hemophilia person on your plan could be $1 million to $1.5 million a year, year after year after year. This drug, $3.5 million, cures it. The reason now, and we have stop loss that covers anything over 350. So as long as these are drugs that you can't predict that someone is going to need that, then we're good. We've got all the coverage we need. But stop loss carriers are trying to figure out how they pool their coverage as an organization to make sure that they can cover these things. And I think that they've been pretty proactive in doing that and taking a little bit of piece of everyone's premium and putting that into a pool to cover these drugs. But again, you have drugs that are coming on the market that are $2.5, $3.5 million.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Yeah, thank you. The stop loss is at 350,000. That's gone up. I mean, it was 250,000. I don't know how long ago. I could be dating myself here, but
Yeah. It was probably 6 or 7 years ago. There were a few aldermen that were really concerned that we were spending more on stop loss than we were getting in reimbursements. I remember the meeting well of saying, we're not trying to game the system with stop loss. We're not trying to win. We're trying to have that level out our claims. So there was the request to go to 500,000 at that point. You're right, we were about 250 at the time. We've been at 350 for 4 or 5 years now. Now, one of the things to think about, though, is if medical trend, let's just use 10% because it's easy. If medical trend is 10% and 10% and 10%, and we keep a $350,000 specific stop loss level, there's a leveraging effect, right? Because if claims go, that 350 technically should go to 385, right, and then up from there. So we have to be careful to manage our fixed cost, which is the stop loss premium, and manage that against the claim risk. And we do that analysis each year. And if it makes sense, we'll pull the trigger and say, yeah, we should go to 375 or 400 because there's enough premium savings to offset that based on historic results.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So kind of getting to the home stretch here. So sort of some opportunities here. I'll hit on each of these quickly. We've got some slides, but I'll try to get through them. Outpatient surgery. All of these issues here, outpatient surgery, independent lab services, high-cost imaging, urgent care, These are all issues where employees have a choice. And we have the program called Smart Shopper. I think you're all familiar with that. And Smart Shopper really is the carrot to say, if you will go to the lower cost provider, I really should say the more efficient provider, we'll give you an incentive to do that. Because the cost variation is so great, and there's no difference in quality. All of the providers in the network are vetted by Anthem. Anthem has gone through all of their due diligence with them. So you don't have to, healthcare is not like many things where if you buy, tissue and it's half the price, you're getting a different quality, right? Oftentimes in healthcare, the lower cost, doing it over and over and over, is better quality. So it's a hard thing to kind of get your head around. The next slide. So this just looks at outpatient surgery, kind of a cost comparison. So if you look to the far right, in the current period, if you have that done at a hospital in outpatient surgery, so we're looking at surgery to surgery, $11,600 on average, $3,200 in a surgery center. So National Ambulatory Surgical Center, Elliott One Day up in Manchester, with the same doctor. What happens is it's the cost of the surgical unit that is the difference between the hospital or the surgery center. And the outcomes are generally better in the surgery center, lower infection rate, because if you think about it, if you're gonna have an outpatient surgery at a surgery center and you've got a cold, they're gonna cancel it, can't come in. Hospital, different story, right? That's where the sick people are. So it's kind of that opportunity to get people to make the choice of going to the surgery center, ambulatory surgical center versus the hospital. Now that can be challenging in some situations because the doctor may say, hey, here's where I do my surgery. And you want to use that doctor, right? But oftentimes they have privileges at both an ambulatory surgical center and a hospital. Next slide, please. This just looks at if everything that could be done, if everything was done at the ambulatory surgical center, your cost is $3 million. Everything was done at the hospital, your cost is $11 million. In fiscal '24, here's where we are at 8. So we've done some good stuff, but there's a lot more opportunity. And we want to just keep having these conversations and keep pushing Smart Shopper and get people to the more efficient provider, because if they're in the HSA, it saves them money right now, but it also saves them money long-term because they're paying 20% of the cost. So independent versus hospital lab, roughly a little bit more than half the cost or a little less than half the cost of having those lab services done at LabCorp or Quest versus having them done in the hospital. And this is just kind of look at the total dollars. So if everything was done in the hospital, 2.1 million, everything done at an independent lab, 874,000. We're on the high side of that at 1.7. This is probably the area that's kind of the most frustrating because it's super simple. LabCorp or Quest. You don't need to look anything up. We just need to get people to think LabCorp or Quest. High-tech radiology, so these are MRIs, things of that nature. About half the cost at an independent, so a dairy imaging or something like that versus the hospital. Quite frankly, this is one where the hospitals have come way down. I mean, it used to be 2,000, 2,100. They've come way down. The independents have come down too. So this has been really kind of a positive thing over time. And then you can just see the same kind of thing. If everything was done at the least efficient, 1.1 million, most efficient, 626, and we're kind of in the middle. Last thing, probably some good news here. The kind of orange there is the bigger orange number. That's your walk-in. So people are, instead of going to the emergency room, running there, and I think people know you're going to be there 2-3 hours, they're using the walk-in centers, and they're using urgent care.
Yeah. It is 6, 10, 12 hours,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is a bit of good news, and there's the savings is dramatic. So so happy that people are doing that. So one of the things, we saw those slides, 12 in 2022, 12 in 2023 of cancer diagnoses that were over $250,000. And this really kind of gives you a look at if cancer is caught early, I mean, never mind the human impact, right? We all know that that's kind of unmeasurable. But the financial impact, if it's caught in stage 1, cost of $172 versus stage 4, $363. And it's generally about double, and then obviously there's the human impact of that. So we've been working and talking with a company called United Diagnostic Services, quite frankly brought to us by the fire department. And what they do is testing that's more around ultrasound, and it's sort of soft tissue testing. It's very reasonably priced, and we only need to detect 1 or 2 early to have a big impact. The other one, did you want to talk about that?
No, I'll let you
Okay,
finish, and then
okay.
I'll chime in, yep.
The other one that we're looking at, and we're actually piloting this with a company of ours out of New York. This is really kind of cool stuff. So this is a company that's developed a blood test that if you have a cancer cell, it's going to shed a certain enzyme. This blood test can pick up this enzyme, and then with AI algorithms and so on, they can pinpoint it with like 90% accuracy to the organ from where that cell came and where that cancer was. This is like detecting cancer, not at stage 1, but at like stage 0.5. It's not cheap. The test is $900 or so. Generally recommended for people over 50 or over 40 with some type of family history. This is something that we're piloting with actually 3 or 4. Hub nationally is piloting with 3 or 4 companies across the country. We're doing it with one of our larger clients, 4,000 or 5,000 people based out of New York. And we're really interested to see. So far, it was just rolled out in January. I think we have 30 people that have already signed up to take the test. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But I think, as cancer is such a big issue, everything that we can do to get that early is really important.
So all I'd like to add in is, as mentioned a few moments ago, our fire department has been really on the forefront of this. They are currently looking to implement early detection for their specialty teams. But I think we as a community need to have a conversation about whether we want to look at taking a little wider of a lens, and then not just the fire, but any of our other first responders, including DPW, because of this overall healthcare savings that we could realize. If from a numbers perspective, putting aside whether it's right or wrong to do for our employees, this could be a good cost containment exercise for us. And so it's something that I would like to explore over the year or so to look to see if we can implement. Right now, the fire department is doing it through their budget and their department. If we continue this conversation, we would look to move it more towards the healthcare benefits budget, and try to work with Anthem to develop a program that we could open up to a little bit larger of a population here in the city, with the eye towards trying to reduce our savings in the long run. It's well worth it for us to spend a couple $100s now, knowing that there's a potential savings of 110% or whatever it may be a few years later.
Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So, so I understand, the health industry is, in this country is, a very difficult one to get a hold, to get a hold of, I think. And there's very, little we can do, about that. But something we can do, I think, people can get sick through no fault of their own, but a lot of people get sick because they smoke or they drink or they're overweight, they don't exercise, they have a lot of bad habits. Are we doing anything to promote good health habits among our employees, so hopefully if they're healthier, they won't get sick.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I was
Tom,
I was just
deliver the
gonna-
good news.
I was just going to lead it off to say that the HR department has just made an investment in really, there are things that the insurance carriers do, right? They look at data of people that are pre-diabetic, and they send them information and say, hey, you can be part of this program where you can have a nurse help you with your weight and what you're eating and all the things that you're doing. So there are a lot of programs like that. Very few people take advantage of them. But the HR team just made a big investment in a very, very qualified person to really bring that wellness home right to the employees where they work. And Kathy, I'll let you kind of take off.
Yeah, we went out there looking for a wellness benefits specialist, somebody who has notable experience in wellness. And we found Christy. Great. She's been in the field for over 13 years. She's implemented through Easter Seals, has worked with Anthem already, knows the wellness team there. She's been with us 2 weeks. She's already meeting with schools, fire, creating a committee. I mean, it's going to be amazing. And our goal is health awareness. Get your routine visits done. We have a limited budget. We have $25,000 that's given to us by Anthem, and we're going to use that money to reward people for doing a step challenge or lose, gain, or maintain challenge. Do their routine appointments every quarter, giving away something to encourage people. And our committees will be somebody from every union, from unaffiliated, and they'll meet every other week and talk about what they want to do to help the employees become aware. Use Smart Shopper. You know, go to LabCorp and I got $50. I would have went to my CMC, but no, I got $50 for going to LabCorp. So teaching, she's got a big job, a huge job, and she's starting from square one when we don't really have a wellness group right now. And I think it's the best money we've ever spent. She's going to do fabulous. You're going to start, employees are going to start seeing her emails going out there. She's got a newsletter already coming out for February. It's Heart Health Month. Some games, some challenges for people. So I think what you're saying is so true. If the employees are not aware and don't understand how they can make it better for themselves, they're not going to do it. Use that HSA money on the least expensive procedure so that you're not paying a lot of money. I mean, it's going to be a great thing. I think we're excited. We've had our first meeting, and we'll have it, yeah.
And we'll be able to engage people within Hub and actually get data. So if we're identifying, diabetes or pre-diabetics, cancer, heart disease, we can try to tailor programs, and we can get a baseline of that data so that we can see if we've made an impact and we've made a change to that. So we can come back to you and say, hey, we're doing a really good job with this. This is what we've seen. Can we get another $25,000? Can we get $50,000 to invest in this? But we need to show you the data.
And everything we're talking about, we told you about this last year. So we're implementing what we told you we were going to do last year right now. So hopefully we'll have some numbers next year when we come back before you and tell you about the progress we've made.
Good, thank you.
Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I think, the biggest piece of this whole thing is like you said, awareness. And I think I mentioned it last year when you guys were here because I've been in companies for a long time, and we've always had, the wellness challenges and
Yep.
all the different things that, but to the point that, people have to be invested in wanting to do that. And, some people, it doesn't matter whether you have the program or not, they're just not they're gonna do what Alderman Jettie was saying and just not take care of themselves. That's just human nature. Like I look at labs and I go, I go to my doctor and the lab's in the same building. Why am I gonna go, down the street to Quest if it's in my building, right? If it's in the building that I'm in, or even, emergency room. And, one of the things that we look at when we have to take a kid sick or whatever, you know, the nice thing about Foundation, for instance, is they have, you go online, and you can see how long the wait is. So it's like, oh, 39 minutes, okay, good, I'll go to the one in Hudson, because it's only 39, instead of going to the ER, which is 8 or 9 hours, right? So, yeah, I think it's just making people aware. And when it comes to, Alderman Jettie mentioned smoking, so I haven't seen it yet, maybe it's coming up, but, you know, a lot of companies do smoking,
Sensation, yeah.
yeah, well, smoking cessation, but if you smoke, you pay more, right? Or if you don't smoke, you get a bonus, or not a bonus, but just money off. I see that a lot. Is that something that we're offering at this time?
No.
Yeah, we do not have a smoker surcharge.
Okay.
I think the feeling is we would have to negotiate that.
Okay.
And that's, you know, it's interesting. Some of our clients are wholehearted, let's go. And others are like, ooh, we're going to really upset people. And so it's a tougher one than you would think.
Okay, great, thank you.
So sort of last thought here, and this is, the things that we've been talking about are a little bit more nuanced. This is a little bit brute force. And this is looking at, we have a very, very high concentration of people that take the benefits, not surprising to anyone. But we're thinking about, and we're thinking we should offer an incentive for people to opt out. So if they want to go to a spouse's coverage, they can do that, and we'll give them an incentive to do so. There are some rules around it. They'd have to be covered on the plan for 3 years preceding 7/1/25, so July 1st of this year, or be a new hire after 7/1/25. And really the reason is there are some people that don't take the coverage. We don't really want people to say, oh, well, I'll take the coverage for a year, and then for the next 10 years, I'll get this stipend. So we're, you know, trying to be thoughtful of that. Employees have to show proof of other coverage, and it can't be the exchange or it can't be Medicare. We can't incentivize someone to go to the federal exchange. We can't incentivize someone to go on to Medicare, even if they're age 65. Just government rules, so we want to be careful of that. Can't be an employee whose spouse is a Nashua City or school employee. And then the payment to them is made per paycheck, so it's administratively easy to manage. Yes.
So one thing I've heard people say is, oh, it sounds fine, but what happens if my spouse also loses his job, and now I don't have health insurance? Can
You
I
can't
jump
come
right
back.
onto the cities?
That's a
Yes.
change of status. You can
Okay.
come back, yes.
And quite frankly, one of the reasons for making the payments on a per paycheck basis, so if that happens halfway through the year, we haven't paid someone out for the full year, and then we're trying to recoup that or figure that all out.
So, just, if I may, just, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
I just want to clarify, what we just discussed, we have not implemented yet. It's something we would be looking to roll out July 1st. We are looking to do it as a policy within the city for every employee. It is not something that we are looking to put into the contracts. And so we are seeking this in a way to try to, contain costs. And the numbers you saw on the slide are estimates. We're hoping that they're achievable, but we won't know until we actually implement. The thought process is let's do this for a year, see how we do, and revisit it. And if it makes sense, we'll continue. And if not, we'll reformulate the plan and move forward. But everything that we're trying to do is to try to contain our benefits costs from increasing year over year at the amounts that they have been.
So really just our
Excuse me,
I'm
Alderman
sorry.
Wiltshire, do you have a
No,
question?
I just had a comment, because I run a self-insured plan for a group of 70 people. And we've been self-insured for 25 years now. And it's a very young group, so our stop loss is like 30,000.
Yeah, sure.
Not
Small, yeah.
350,000, but,
Yep.
Still.
magnitude of size, yep.
Right. But as I've been there, right, this was 25 years ago, people like me are 25 years older, and I have a lot more claims than the 20-something people we're hiring, the 20 and 30-year-olds that we're hiring. And that's the same with most of our administrative staff. We're all getting near retirement age, and claims are more. However, it's really been a savings for us over the 25 years. I can't say how much we've enjoyed having a self-insured plan. And every time we say, you know, we're looking at our budget, and we'll say to our agent, hey, you know, can we look at the fully insured plan? And he's like, no. You're crazy to not keep your self-insured plan. So we have, and we've enjoyed it, and I think the incentives and things you're building in here are really great. Good. Really great.
I think our demographic as the city of Nashua is much older. And that's when you're going to start seeing the claims escalate as you get into the baby boomers and the older. We have employees staying till they're 65, 70 years old, still on our plan, not on Medicare Advantage. So I think this might be may be great. It may work for a lot of employees.
You guys are well ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
25 years. So really just sort of the things that we're working on, I think we've really kind of hit them here. One of them, this was like sandbagging a little bit. We had renegotiated the pharmacy contract that was effective for July. So it kind of covers it. There's a 6-month delay in rebates. So we're going to see some of that pick up really starting to hit in January. And that's probably $500,000-$600,000. So between enhanced rebates and discounts. We talked about the opt-out incentive. We're going to continue to look at gallery and then the early cancer screenings for fire and other first responders. And another thing that we're looking at is the Anthem Site of Service Plan that is more of an incentive to, again, use those low-cost providers, the independent lab, ambulatory surgical center, and so on. Happy to take any questions.
Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, thank you. You know, like I said before, you know, this is a huge problem. You know, that's why we have people like you who understand it a lot better than people like me. But you know, I hear a lot about, read a lot about, you know, the prescription drugs being an area that, you know, it seems like there's a wide, you know, you can buy the same drug, you know, at any number of different prices. And it seems like, you know, I keep reading about how, you know, you can buy the same drug cheaper in Canada, or you know, in Europe, they charge a lot less for these same drugs. And I know you don't have a way of solving that, but is there a pharmaceutical company, or is there a drug company, or I'm not sure what to call it, like, you know, a CVS or a Walgreens or somebody that does the job better, you know, that keeps the cost as low as possible, and is it able for us to identify that company and get our drugs or prescriptions from that company as opposed to others?
Yes, and I think what you're really kind of referring to is a pharmacy benefit manager. So if you think about, you have manufacturer of the drugs, and there's dozens and dozens and dozens. And then you have these pharmacy benefit managers, CVS, Caremark, Express Scripts, Optum Rx. Those three companies control 80% of the drugs used by Americans. The pharmacy benefit managers negotiate with the manufacturer. They negotiate those rebates, and they negotiate the discount. They might negotiate a 25% discount on Effexor. And they might say, hey, health plan, Anthem, Cigna, Harvard, whomever, we're going to give you 20%. We're going to keep 5%. And then Anthem, Cigna, Harvard, whomever says to City of Nashua, hey guys, we're going to give you 18%, and they're going to keep 2%. What we do is we go out to the big 3, CVS, Optum, Express Scripts, which, by the way, CVS owns Aetna Healthcare. Express Scripts is owned by Cigna. Optum is owned by United Healthcare. and then there were a few stragglers. We go out to them, and we actually have people, we have now a team of 12 people that used to work for those PBMs. So they know kind of where the bodies are buried and the games that are played. And you talk about playing games, PBMs are just, it's legal racketeering, in my opinion. I'm probably gonna get sued. But it's a crazy game. And so we're constantly trying to figure out how to get that very best deal. And there are different programs that have that spread pricing. There are different programs that are transparent. And it's kind of interesting, the transparent programs are usually less effective than the other programs. But when I say that we renegotiate pharmacy, that's what we're doing. So we're going out to 7 or 8 different programs. And you might have 2 different programs that are with CVS, but they're just giving each one of the programs a different deal. And there's so many pieces and so many layers. It's trying to figure out what the right combination of all these different dozens of layers gets you the best deal. It sounds crazy, and it really is. Going back to your point about buying drugs cheaper in other countries will, I mean, we are subsidizing the world. Other companies will say, no, you can only sell that drug, Pfizer, you can only sell that drug for X amount in Canada or in the EU or wherever it may be, and that's it. So they might actually be selling that drug at a loss, but hey, no problem, we'll make it up in the US. And I don't know what the ultimate solution for that is. Is it there's one price everywhere in the world? I don't know. But it's kind of the deal, it's kind of what we're dealt in the industry, and it's our job to find the very best deal that we can.
Okay, if there are any other
Could I just follow up?
follow-up?
So, but do we require our employees to purchase their prescriptions from whoever we've identified as giving us the best deal?
So the employees want choice. So there are programs where you can say, you can only get your drugs at CVS or Walmart. So we could do that. And we think about the hue and cry if we were to lose St. Joseph in the network, even though Southern New Hampshire's right down the road, and there were plenty of primary care physicians, we would have a major revolt in doing that. But could we do that? Yes. Are those the least expensive place to get drugs? Yes. Does that answer your question? So we can trim it down, and we could say, hey, all the least efficient drugs in these categories, they're no longer covered. So if you need a proton pump inhibitor, you can get these 2 drugs. Now, there are 20 of them, but you can only get these 2. We can pull strings like that, but they come at a big price with employee dissatisfaction, particularly in a union environment. Most of our non-union companies don't want to go that restrictive, but we could.
Alderman Senate, did you have some?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I have a bit of a human approach question, really for any of the presenters, because it's something that comes up in the annual benefit presentations in my line of work, and I've also sat through 2 of them here now in this chamber. And it sounds to me like one of the biggest opportunities for savings is this idea of, you talked about the independent labs, Quest, things like that. And how do you get over, because I still haven't had this answered from my own human resources department, how do you get over that human curve that Alderman Tebow had alluded to, where I'm a patient with Southern New Hampshire Health. If I'm at any of their facilities and they say, well, we'd like to take a look at your blood, we'd like to take a look at your glucose, it's right there. Yeah, do I want my benefit costs to stay low? Of course. But do I want to leave Southern New Hampshire Health, drive down to 300 Main Street to Quest Diagnostics, and then come back? Absolutely not. So how do you get past that? Because that's a real human curve, and they're selling convenience.
So I can give you my own experience on how I personally, Tom DeLacy, get over that. So this goes back 12, 13 years. I got blood work. My doctor was at Elliott. I lived right outside of Manchester. I went and got my blood work done, and I got a bill. I was on an HSA, first or second year of having an HSA. I got a bill for, I remember exactly, $488. I just got basic, like basic blood work, 10-panel, nothing fancy. And I called, and I'm like, this can't be right. $488, and again, this is 12, 13, 14 years ago. And so I called, so they went, oh, no, that's right. I called Quest, and I said, what would, if I had this, because I actually had the thing, because they gave me a list of places within Elliott that I could go to. So I couldn't get it done right there in the doctor's office, but years later you could. Anyway, long story. I called Quest, and they said, yeah, probably $85, $90. So I essentially stroked a check for $488 out of my HSA, but it could have been $90. So the next time I said to my doctor, why don't you just send me to Quest? I'm like, it's right diagonally across, I can walk there. And he's like, well, why would I do that? And I said, well, because Elliott is 5 times more expensive. He said, oh, yeah. Yeah, no, you can go to Quest. And instead of giving me a card that said all the places at Elliott I could go to, it just had the what he wanted me to get for tests.
Yeah.
And that was my aha. And every time I've had a meeting with employees, I talk to them about that. And if you're in the HSA, it matters. If you're in the HMO, it doesn't matter.
That helps.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so to follow on to that, I think what we need to do is we need to continue to try to educate people about the HSA and the benefits of that, because that's first and foremost. Second is, and this is what I'm hoping Christie's gonna do, is spend the time talking and educating our workforce, our employees, so they can understand these nuances, because most employees don't understand some of these nuances. I'll use myself as an example. I have learned so much in that regard, because I just thought, I'll go down to the lab right underneath my medical office, because, well, it's right at the bottom of the building, and it makes sense to do that because it's convenient. For the first time ever, 6 weeks ago, I asked my primary care, oh, where else can I get my blood work done?
Good for him.
I did, thank you. And so I hope it's more time that we spend with the employees, because our employees are so focused on doing their job day in and day out, and when they're not doing their job, they're trying to keep a roof over their head, food on the table. They're not thinking about some of these things. And I think we can help them by just having these kind of soft conversations.
We can also affect it through plan design, that site of service plan I was talking about. So we have Smart Shopper, right, which is the carrot. Hey, if you call and you go to Quest, you get $25. You can also build a design that's a kind of the stick, in that if I go to the hospital lab, it's subject to my deductible, and my deductible is $1,000 in an HMO type of plan. So you can do that within plan design as well. You'd have to negotiate that, but
I also
might be worth it.
suggest, I just usually say to them, think about it, you have it done in the hospital, what bills are they paying? They're paying their taxes, they're paying the electric bill, they're paying all their employees. Then you go to this outbuilding, that's this little 12 by 12 building or office. What are less overhead expenses? They're not gonna pass it on to the patient. So you gotta think of it that way. You know, it really is.
Oh, do you have a question, Alden?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to go in a different direction here. So, we have a different federal government now, and executive orders are going fast and furious. So do you project anything changing in the health insurance sphere that's would affect this over the next couple of months?
Over the next couple of months, I don't think so. The only thing that I think could be impacted is some of the changes from the Inflation Reduction Act that impacted the Medicare Advantage plan could change. And I didn't mention before, you don't make a contribution to that, so there's no financial impact to the city, but there's certainly a financial impact to the users, to the retirees. I think there'll be a lot of looking into pharmacy rebates and how they work, but I think that's several years down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wiltshire?
I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said, you know, you can pay $90 or you can pay $448. When people see that, you know, I mean, when you sit down and you know, not write a check, because people don't do that anymore, but when you go to bill pay,
Yeah.
and you're, you know, your option is pay $448, so you don't have to go next door or down the street, you think that's impactful.
You just have to educate the employees that you don't have to go where your doctor says to go for the surgery, for the lab, for that test. Just make them understand, cost of care is so important. Does Anthem have that available to us? I haven't been on it long enough. Cost of care, and you put what type of MRI you're having, and it'll tell you who has the least expensive. And it's never the hospital, never.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you. You made a comment about rebates changing. When I was up in the State House, there was a bill that came through that tried to remove pharmacy rebates. I've heard they're trying to bring things like that back again, and it would just be for the state. If that were to happen again in the state of New Hampshire, could that affect?
It wouldn't affect your plan, because your plan is governed by federal law, not
Okay.
state law. But the interesting thing about that is, let's get rid of rebates. Well, rebates put $3 million back in your bank account.
Yeah.
So it's really
I
kind
voted
of what
against
are
it,
they?
just so we know.
What, it's really a bigger issue of what are they going to do with that? Some of the conversation has been that rebate would happen at the point of service.
Right.
So it sounds great in that the individual would get that, but what if it's a $500 rebate, let's say, and I've got an HMO plan with a $20 copay? Are they gonna give me $480? Like, how would that work? The last thing you want is your employee making money by going to the pharmacy to get a really expensive drug. So there's a lot to be figured out there.
You all set?
Just a quick comment. I had issue with them trying to remove the rebate only simply because I felt that it was just on a state level and that there wasn't equity. If it was something that was going to happen on a federal level, it would have been one thing, but to happen on a state level just seemed to be. So I'm glad to hear that it would not affect ours, because ours works on a federal. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. And
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
look forward to that legislation to implement some of these things, Director Cummings.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, unfinished business,
None.
new business resolutions.
We have R-24-118, relative to the supplemental appropriation of $120,836.27 of FY 2025 unanticipated revenue into Fund Number 7024, Opioid Abatement Expendable Trust Fund. I'd like to make a motion for final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R-24-118. Any comments? Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So I guess Director Bagley has left
Yep.
the room. Okay. The only comment I wanted to make, or a question I wanted to ask, and maybe someone else knows the answer. So she talked about, some of this money being used for the Elm Street warming station, and we all got an email talking about how they don't let people sleep laying down, they have to stand up to sleep. Does anybody know what that's all about? Just sounds so strange to me, but maybe there's a reason, I don't know.
Well, Director Cummings wants to.
Yes, thank you. Just so I'm clear, the question at hand is, why aren't people sleeping? Being able to lay down to sleep, is that essentially the question?
Yeah, we got an email saying that people were not allowed to lay down to sleep. They had to sit up or stand up. And it just seems strange to me. There was no explanation as to why that would be, and I was just wondering why that would be.
Director Cummings?
Yep, and I'm going to keep my comments very, very brief and very simple, because I am not the expert. But the way it's been explained to me, again, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services, is we're providing a warming station, which is, the thought process is to get people out of the elements and to provide a place for someone to stay warm, but it is not a quote-unquote shelter where you might be able to experience a cot and be able to lay down and to be able to sleep and to be able to have that level of service. And we don't provide a level of service where we could have people sleeping per se. But what we're doing is, and I understand it, is we set up tables and people can sit and they can be around a table sitting and be able to congregate and recreate and socialize, but keep those activities limited while they're in the warming station. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Alderman Senate?
Just to add to that, and again, this is sort of secondhand information that was conveyed to me, but ahead of the warming station being opened, myself, Alderman Moran, and Alderman Lopez attended the information night that was held at Elm Street. And it was conveyed at that time, and I don't know the specifics of it, but there is some sort of regulatory stoppage of allowing people to sleep in that facility as part of its use as a warming station due to the either the zoning or the use of that facility and that land as a it's not coded or set up to be a shelter where people are allowed to sleep.
Director Cummings?
Thank you. You know, I know Director Sullivan's behind me, and so I will defer to him on the specific regulatory aspects, but I think it depends on the code, and I think it depends on the building, and so I think when we're hearing some things out in the community, it really depends on the building. It depends on the building code, and so I can't really speak per se to the Elm Street Middle School, whether there's regulatory hurdles or not, and so I would have to check into that a little bit more. But yes, certain buildings may have some regulatory impediments. I'm not exactly sure whether that's actually apropos for the Elm Street Middle School. I'd need to look into that.
All set, Alderman Senate? Anyone else? If not, motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 24-118. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
We have R-24-119 relative to the acceptance of $75,000 of anticipated grant funds and to accept and appropriate an additional $25,000 of unanticipated grant funds for housing opportunity planning HOP grant from the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage to the full board of R 24-119. Questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. For clarification from earlier comments from Director Sullivan, just want to understand, HOP 1.0 was the recode, and HOP 2.0 are the ADU plans that we're offering?
Yes. Director Sullivan?
Yes, to Alderman Sullivan's question, HOP 1.0 funding went to supplementing the land use zoning code, Alderman Sullivan, the zoning code itself.
Okay.
HOP 2.0, these monies will go to another section of land use, but in the site plan and subdivision regulations that govern commercial development and subdivision.
Okay, just a quick
Follow-up?
follow-up too. You had mentioned you hadn't decided yet on the ADU in a box, my term. But as far as how that's going to proceed, as far as charge, no charge, when you decide on how that plan goes forward, how will we know? How will you communicate that out?
Yes, Director Sullivan?
Alderman Sullivan, that's a great question. I'm not sure I have a 100% solid answer for you tonight. There is a bit of a variable that I didn't talk about in full earlier in the evening, and that is that we've presented those 3 projects, ADUs, site plan, subdivision, as options for how we intend to use those funds. To be quite honest with you, we think that the site plan subdivision piece of that is 80% of the funding, if not more. And the ADU plans, we may have to find some additional funding to actually complete that piece of it. I'll tell you, the sexiest piece of the project is the ADU plans and the idea of that standard specification. But the fundamentally needed part is the site plan and subdivision regulations. But is it possible that we might try to reallocate existing funding or seek money as part of the budget process to do that piece of things, or find an additional grant? That's very much possible, but right now we're looking at these projects as options.
Okay.
All set, Alderman Sullivan? Any other questions? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R 24-119. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business ordinances,
None,
table in committee,
none.
general discussion. Seeing no one. Public comment, no members of the public here. Remarks by Alderman. Seeing none. Alderman Wiltshire.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 9 PM.